The war in Ukraine is not just a regional conflict, it's a global turning point. What began as a struggle over territory and sovereignty has quickly become a crisis with far-reaching consequences for people everywhere, no matter where they live. The ripple effects of this war are being felt in every corner of the globe, from bustling cities to remote villages. The 2022 invasion sent shockwaves worldwide, affecting everything from food prices in Africa to energy bills in Europe. As supply chains were disrupted, families found themselves paying more for basic necessities, and entire economies faced new uncertainties. The cost of living has risen sharply for millions, and governments everywhere have had to rethink how they secure food and energy for their people. It challenges the principle that borders can't be changed by force, setting a precedent for how future disputes may be resolved. If the world allows such aggression to go unchecked, it could encourage similar actions elsewhere, threatening the stability of international law and the safety of smaller nations. The war has triggered Europe's largest refugee crisis since World War II and disrupted global food and energy supplies. Millions have been forced to flee their homes, seeking safety in neighboring countries, while others face shortages and uncertainty. The humanitarian impact is staggering, with families separated and communities uprooted. Ukraine and Russia are major exporters, so the fighting has caused shortages and price spikes far beyond their borders. Wheat, corn, and sunflower oil, staples for many countries, have become harder to find, driving up prices and increasing hunger in vulnerable regions. The Black Sea, once a vital trade route, is now a zone of uncertainty. The conflict has reignited Cold War tensions, expanded NATO, and forced countries to reconsider alliances. Nations are investing more in defense, and old rivalries have resurfaced, making the world feel less predictable and more divided. Diplomatic relations are being tested as leaders navigate a new era of uncertainty. At its core, this war is about sovereignty versus spheres of influence, and it's changing the nature of warfare with new technologies. Drones, cyber attacks, and information warfare are now central to the battlefield, reshaping how conflicts are fought and how nations defend themselves. Understanding this conflict is essential. It's shaping the world we all live in. The choices made today will echo for generations, influencing peace, security, and prosperity across the globe. The war in Ukraine is a reminder that in our interconnected world, no conflict is ever truly isolated. To truly understand the roots of today's war in Ukraine, we need to travel back to 1991, a pivotal year when the Soviet Union collapsed and Ukraine boldly declared its independence. This moment marked not just the birth of a new nation, but also the beginning of a long and complicated journey to define its identity and alliances. In the aftermath, Ukraine inherited the world's third-largest nuclear arsenal. But in 1994, seeking security and international acceptance, Ukraine agreed to give up its nuclear weapons. In exchange, it received security assurances from Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom under the Budapest Memorandum, a promise that its borders would be respected. Through the 1990s and 2000s, Ukraine found itself walking a tightrope, balancing deep historical, economic, and cultural ties with Russia, while also nurturing aspirations to join the European Union and integrate with the West. This balancing act defined Ukrainian politics for decades, but public sentiment began to shift. The 2004 Orange Revolution was a powerful display of Ukrainians demanding fair elections and democratic reforms. A decade later, the 2014 Maidan Revolution saw even larger crowds braving winter in Kyiv, calling for closer ties with Europe and an end to corruption. These movements alarmed Russia, which saw Ukraine's growing Western orientation as a direct threat to its influence. Tensions peaked when Ukraine's pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, was ousted in 2014 after months of protests and violent clashes. For Moscow, Ukraine's pivot toward the West and the possibility of NATO expansion right up to its borders was unacceptable. Russian leaders feared encirclement and the loss of a key buffer state, fueling deep-seated anxieties. This mounting tension set the stage for Russia's aggressive response. In early 2014, Russian forces swiftly moved into Crimea, seizing control and redrawing the map of Europe almost overnight. In the years that followed, Russian state media and officials pushed a powerful narrative that Ukraine was being stolen by the West, and that intervention was necessary to protect Russian interests and people. This story became central to justifying Russia's actions on the world stage. After the 2014 Maidan Revolution, Russia swiftly seized Crimea using unmarked troops and staged a disputed referendum. The annexation violated international law and the Budapest Memorandum's security guarantees. Simultaneously, Russia backed separatists in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, sparking a brutal war. Moscow called it a local uprising, but it was a hybrid war: covert support, propaganda, and destabilization. The Donbas conflict dragged on for 8 years, killing thousands and draining Ukraine. Diplomatic efforts like the Minsk agreements failed, leaving a frozen conflict. Russia's strategy kept Ukraine destabilized and blocked its Western ambitions. Sanctions followed but didn't change Moscow's course. The unresolved crises in Crimea and Donbas directly led to the full-scale war in 2022. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion, shattering Europe's security order. Putin claimed he was demilitarizing and denazifying Ukraine, but these were widely dismissed as pretexts. The real concern was NATO's expansion and Ukraine's Western alignment. Russia aimed for a quick victory, but fierce Ukrainian resistance forced a long, grinding war. The invasion triggered massive sanctions, a refugee crisis, and a global energy and food shock. NATO reinforced its eastern flank, and the West united against Russia. The war redrew the geopolitical map, deepening divides and creating new alliances. The world now faces a more volatile and unpredictable era. By mid-2025, the war has become a brutal stalemate, with static front lines and relentless artillery and drone warfare. Russia pushes slowly in the east and north, relying on mass mobilization and a war economy. Ukraine depends on Western aid and advanced weapons, using innovation to offset Russia's numbers. Both sides suffer staggering casualties, over 1 million killed or wounded and tens of thousands of civilian deaths. Ukraine's drone strikes inside Russia show its reach, but risk escalation. Diplomatic talks are stalled. Each side blames the other for failed peace efforts. Russia demands recognition of its gains, Ukraine insists on full withdrawal. The war is now a test of endurance, with no end in sight. The conflict is shaped by two leaders, Ukraine's Zelenskyy, a symbol of resistance, and Russia's Putin, determined to restore Russian power. Their personal ambitions and political philosophies have become emblematic of the broader struggle between democracy and authoritarianism. Zelenskyy, once a comedian, now stands as a wartime president, rallying his nation and appealing to the world for support. Putin, meanwhile, seeks to reassert Russia's influence, challenging the post-Cold War order and testing the resolve of the West. NATO is a key player, providing aid but avoiding direct combat, while expanding to include Finland and Sweden. This expansion signals a historic shift in European security, as countries once neutral now seek protection under NATO's umbrella. The alliance's unity is tested as it balances deterrence with the risk of provoking a wider war. The US and EU coordinate support, balancing aid with the risk of escalation. Their economic sanctions and military assistance are crucial, but leaders must constantly weigh the consequences of each decision, knowing that missteps could have global repercussions. Belarus enables Russia's war effort. China offers economic and diplomatic backing, stopping short of military aid. Both countries play strategic roles, with Belarus providing logistical support and China leveraging its global influence to shape the conflict's narrative. China's stance is closely watched. Any shift could change the war's trajectory. The world's attention is fixed on Beijing, as its decisions could tip the balance, either prolonging the conflict or paving the way for negotiations. Mercenary groups like Wagner highlight the rise of non-state actors. These private armies operate in the shadows, complicating accountability and adding new layers of unpredictability to the battlefield. The UN documents abuses and provides aid but is hamstrung by Russia's veto. Despite its efforts, the organization's ability to intervene is limited, revealing the challenges of enforcing international law in a divided world. Mediation attempts by Turkey and the Vatican have failed to bridge the divide. Their efforts underscore the deep mistrust and entrenched positions that make peace elusive. The web of alliances and interests makes a simple resolution nearly impossible. Each actor pursues its own goals, weaving a complex tapestry of power, ambition, and history that continues to shape the fate of the region. The war drags on because Ukraine and Russia's goals are irreconcilable. Ukraine demands full liberation of its territory. Russia insists on keeping its gains and blocking NATO membership. Neither side can afford to back down. Any compromise is seen as defeat. Western aid keeps Ukraine fighting, but not enough for a decisive victory. The West avoids escalation, but this has led to a grinding stalemate. Years of broken agreements have destroyed trust, making negotiations nearly impossible. Without a dramatic shift or trusted mediator, the war is likely to remain frozen or simmering. The world must brace for a long, unresolved conflict. Several scenarios could dangerously escalate the war. A Russian attack, accidental or deliberate, on a NATO country could trigger direct conflict between nuclear powers. Russia might use tactical nuclear weapons if facing catastrophic defeat, risking global disaster. China could start supplying Russia with weapons, splitting the world into hostile blocs, and deepening the conflict. The war could settle into a permanent, militarized standoff like Korea, with no peace treaty and constant risk of renewed fighting. Any of these scenarios would destabilize Europe and the world for decades. The risks of escalation are real and growing. Preventing a wider war is a global imperative. The Ukraine war proves that no major conflict is ever truly local in our interconnected world. Its ripple effects, on food, energy, and security, are global and long-lasting. The conflict has become a testing ground for new military technologies and tactics reshaping warfare. It has fractured the post-Cold War order, sharpened divides, and made global cooperation harder. The outcome will help define the world our children inherit, one of law and diplomacy, or force and chaos. The immense suffering and risks are not just Ukraine's problems, they're global challenges. Understanding this war is essential for anyone who cares about the future. The search for a just peace is a necessity for global stability and a shared future.